Hello, everyone. Section 5.2, we're going to be using more of the identities. This first part, you're simply going to be focusing on the Pythagorean identities once again. So sine squared plus cosine squared is equal to 1. So looking at this, the right side you're supposed to leave alone. What your intuition should generate in looking at this is, hey, the right side only has cosines, so that should focus you. I need to get rid of sine squared. Sine squared is worth, so sine squared is 1 minus cosine squared. That's what sine squared is worth. So you're going to replace this with what it's worth. So you have 1 minus cosine squared minus cosine squared. Whoops, jumping ahead of myself here. Boink. Okay, cosine squared. So you have 1 minus cosine squared minus cosine squared is minus 2 cosine squared as required. Remember, you're leaving the right side alone. You don't touch the right side. So there you go. It worked. This one, sine squared minus cosine squared is 2 sine squared minus 1. It only has sine squared in it, so that should focus you that you need to get rid of this. Returning back to this, cosine squared is worth 1 minus sine squared. But be a little bit careful. This is what you're going to replace with that, and you're subtracting it. So you have to be a little careful. Minus whatever it's worth. And it's worth 1 minus sine squared. So, sine squared minus 1 plus sine squared. Sine squared and sine squared make 2 sine squared minus 1 is equal to exactly what they had. So everything's good to go as required. Okay. Here, one of the things to focus on is you got a 7 here and a 6 here. So I'm going to rewrite this as cotangent squared plus 1 plus 6. Now, why in the world would I do that? Because cotangent squared plus 1 is worth something. Returning back to sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. I've got a cotangent. Cotangent is cosine over sine, so that means I need to divide by sine squared. That's the clue. Sine squared, sine squared, sine squared. 1 plus cotangent squared is equal to cosecant squared. 1 plus cotangent squared is the same thing as cotangent squared plus 1. It's still equal to cosecant squared. And there's a cotangent squared plus 1. I split the 7 into a 1 and a 6 through adding, so I could generate something to replace this with. Cotangent squared plus 1 is cosecant squared, so you have cosecant squared theta plus 6 as required. There it is. Okay? This one, cotangent of 90 minus theta. You have to remember what this identity is worth. This one is worth tangent of theta times cosecant of theta. When in doubt, cash stuff in for sines and cosines. So you have sine over this. And what I'm writing, not what I'm stumbling over. Okay. Sines cancel, and you have 1 over cosine, which is equal to secant theta. Okay? So you're just replacing stuff with what they're worth. This one, cosecant of negative theta, secant of theta. Well, I guess I'm going to return things in terms of sines and cosines. So you have 1 over sine of negative theta over 1 over the cosine of negative theta. You're dividing by this, so multiply by its reciprocal. Cosine of negative theta over 1 Nothing cancels. You're just going to multiply straight across. So you have cosine of negative theta over sine of negative theta. You'll remember from the identities, cosine of negative theta is the same thing as cosine theta, and sine of negative theta is negative sine theta. You have one negative. This thing is worth cotangent, and you have a single negative, so it's worth negative cotangent of theta as required. Okay? And I think that's the last screen, so there you go.